I am super excited. If you don't know me, I'm Moselle, and I'm the chair of the architecture department, and I'm happy to welcome you, our current students, alums, and some outside guests to this event. This is the second in a series of events we're hosting about navigating an uncertain job market. We have much to learn from our panelists with their experiences in previous recessions and constrictions in the job market. A quick update on what has been happening at UWM. Just like all schools across the country, the Department of Architecture shifted 42 classes online in a short amount of time this semester. We're finishing up the last week of school. We have thesis reviews, super jury, and graduation this week on May 14th, 15th, and 17th. And our faculty have embraced programs like Teams, Collaborate, Ultra, Zoom, Miro, and many other online platforms. We shifted our gallery online in record speed, and thanks to Alex Timmer, who's on the call. And we'll be hosting many of our events like graduation and super jury through the gallery this Friday and Sunday. If you wanted to join in on any of those events, let me know via email. However, even as we embrace the transition as best we can, changes are happening in the profession and the construction industry that will affect students' ability to find internships, secure jobs, and work in the profession. Therefore, we've assembled this stellar group of alums and faculty to share their past experiences and to prepare us for the future. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. John Horkey, if you can wave, John. FAIA with a Bachelor of Architecture from University of Notre Dame, 1984, and a Master's of Business from UWM in 1991. And John is the HR guy, as he's called, and principal at Kaler Slater. Allison Nemec, you want to wave, Allison? Allison is a graduate, 1990 graduate, and principal of Quorum Architects. Brian Howard, excellent. Brian is a BSAS graduate from 2006 and an MArch graduate from 2010, and he's a project architect with Perkins and Will. Ali Kopit, wave. And Ali is an MArch MUP joint graduate from 2008 and is a managing architect from Corbin Associates. Tuan Tran, excellent. Tuan is a BSAS graduate from 2005 and a master's graduate in 2008 and co-founder of Design Fugitives. Alex Timmer. Alex is a BSAS graduate from University of Michigan in 2009 and a master's graduate from the GSD in 2016, and he's an assistant professor at UWM. So we're super excited to have all of our panelists joining us today. And the way we're going to start it off is each of them is going to share with you their story about what happened either in 2008 during the last recession or other kinds of constrictions in the market and their experiences. And then we'll do some Q&A. I'll facilitate some Q&A that I have some questions. There's the chat space. If you have questions during the session, please use that and I'll read those out to our panelists. And then we will go from there. So we have about an hour to talk, and I'm going to start off, we'll just go in the order that I went in. So John, if you want to kick us off with your story, and then if the other panelists want to mute during the session while others are talking, that'd be great.
Absolutely, Mel. And I really am honored to be a part of this. Thank you for asking me to really join these other folks who I greatly respect. And hopefully it'll be helpful. Hopefully it'll provide some insights. My story, I mean, as it relates to 2008, may be the least interesting. I've been with Kaler Slater for 29 years, something like that. So since 1991. And I transitioned, as you noted, into the HR guy role about 21 years ago. So there was if those of you who are old enough to remember, there was a small downturn in 2001, and then obviously the Great Recession in 2008. And so my role really was to help people transition during those times, kind of in and out of the firm. So, you know, I wasn't myself looking for different opportunities in the market. Um, I I think at some point, we can compare and contrast, what we're observing happening right now. And so there is absolutely some stress on the economy. It's being evidenced in, so many different ways. But it is different than 2008. It feels different. The reasons obviously are different. And because I'm an eternal optimist, I think things are going to bounce back much more quickly. But, I don't have any evidence to prove that to anyone. And for those folks who are having anxiety finding their first job or keeping the job that they have, how short or long term this is may not, feel any more or less comforting in the moment. So I don't, like I said, I don't know if my story is nearly as interesting as perhaps the next person that you call on.
All right, well, we'll circle back definitely, John, to like what Kaylor Slater is doing right now in terms of managing the office and the staff and transitioning. So, but we'll jump to Allison if you want to share some thoughts. You're muted for a second.
Yep.
You're muted again.
Oh yeah. Okay, there we go. I came out in 1990, and that was a downturn as well. Obviously nothing like 2001 or 2008, but it still was a challenge. I didn't intend to stay here, oddly. I came out to go to grad school, and I was going to go back to Philadelphia, and my position was gone. So I feel for all of you that may be in similar roles, that there just wasn't a place for me to go back to. And so I stayed here, and I guess I personally think everything happens for a reason. But I don't know about this one. This one kind of puts me over the edge that way. So I think I didn't get a job until fall of 90. I got out obviously in May, and, it was September or October before I landed something. And I guess if I had it to do all over again, I might have stressed less, which is easy for me to say now, and applied more, like, what do I want to, I think the great thing about this time right now is that we're all very reflective, mainly because we're semi-alone and have our thoughts. So I really think, what do we want to be when we grow up is kind of a question that I'm still asking myself through this time. And I encourage you to kind of think about the skills you have as an individual and how you want to apply them in the next stage of your life. And I think that's something that we're very qualified to do. And I think we're very qualified. I think the role of architects in this transition time into the new normal, or the, back to the future, or however, these little terms that are out there, is really kind of interesting. And I think we're very well suited to help. And I think firms are already starting to do that. You see a lot of press on, in business publications that I tend to watch, on the architect's role for redefining the workplace, the retail space, the hotel, so I think there's going to be a lot of demand for our services, and we're creative problem solvers, and that I would just think all of you should really think about what your role in that will be, and become more skilled, and as you continue to apply and continue to try and seek employment in this place. And I guess I did not work at what would have been my first, second, third, or 10th choice when I first got out. And I would just say that no matter where you work, you have the opportunity to learn something. So I learned a lot there, is my typical line. And it's carried me well into the future. So.
Great, thanks, Allison. Brian, how about jumping in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Mo said, I graduated from UWM undergrad in 2006 and came back in 2008 for my graduate degree and graduated in 2010. When I came out of undergrad, it was a booming time, lots of stuff kind of going on in the Middle East. I landed a job at a large firm in Chicago to work on large projects there. And just as I was about to start heading back to grad school, those projects all got shut down. And I saw everyone in the firm around me starting to get laid off. And luckily, I had already made the decision beforehand to go back to school. What I think I did that really helped me coming out was maintain the contacts that I had created when I was originally working, and really making sure that I kept in contact with them, kept abreast of what was going on, and let them know what I was doing, how I was faring, and when I was going to be getting out of school. When I did graduate in 2010, I didn't find a job right away. I moved back to Chicago with my girlfriend, and luckily she let me slum on her couch for a little bit. We're married now, so that's good. But I eventually was able to get my job back after a few months, but during that time off, I was going to as many events as I could, trying to connect with people as much as I could. Obviously, right now, that's harder to do, but that's one of my biggest recommendations is trying to find ways to get your name out there to people, just so that your name is in their head somewhere, that if they see your resume come across their desk, they know that you are very active in the community and very interested in the profession.
Great, Brian, thanks. All right, Allie?
There we go. Hi. So I actually have so it's almost like a combination of some of the previous stories. So I finished my undergrad in architecture from Northeastern University in 2001. And then I finished my grad school in 2008. So 2 not so great years. In 2001, I actually was interestingly kind of disillusioned with architecture and took a little bit of a non-traditional path. So the undergraduate program that I went to at Northeastern was a co-op program. And so I actually got a lot of really great work experience while I was a student. And at my very last co-op, they were actually starting to get slow. So this was 2000-ish. And I got put on loan to a construction company that was a friend of my boss. And he said, hey, would you like to get some construction experience? And so I was working for the architecture firm, but I was on loan for the construction company that was it ended up being a phenomenal experience. I was working for Daniel O'Connell & Sons, which is the construction company that built Stephen Hall's Simmons Hall at MIT. So that worked out amazingly for me. I was actually telling Mo last night, I feel like I've just had a lot of weird, dumb luck. So after I worked in construction with my architecture degree, I then still kind of disillusioned with architecture, joined AmeriCorps. And so I actually spent a year in service with Habitat for Humanity. I've always had a passion for housing. I still work in the housing field. And I wanted to get some hands-on construction experience. So I spent a year building houses with Habitat for Humanity out in Seattle. And so I actually didn't have my first architecture job after my undergrad until about late in 2003. And at that point, people were hiring again. So I got some job experience in a small firm, and then decided that similar to Allison, I was not going to stay in Milwaukee. My coworker was starting her own office. And she's like, go to grad school, get your degree, come back, I've got a job for you. And I called her about 6 months before graduation, and she's like, get a job and hold on to it with a death grip. I'm waiting tables. So that was my experience in 2008. And so I did interview day. I did all the things that I felt I was supposed to do. I reached out to my networks. I was running CDS as a graduate student. And so I just kind of used my networks and called people just to try to get my foot in the door. And I was able to secure a job in September after graduating. And I feel very fortunate to say that I've had a job consistently ever since. So like I said to Mo, I feel like a lot of it is kind of dumb luck, but I think a lot of it is also just kind of following your gut and just trying to make the right choice for you at the time. One of the things I truly believe is that part of knowing what you want is knowing what you don't want. So, the only way that you can learn that is to sometimes, do something you don't think is really aligned with what you thought you were doing, but in the end, it can work out or it can't, but everything's a learning experience.
Great, thanks, Allie.
Yeah,
All right, Juan.
Hello. So I guess I'm sort of a non-traditionalist here, being that I'm not in the field of architecture anymore, but a quick history. Right before 2005, right before my undergrad graduation in 2005, I started working at a firm, getting some experience, and then started working part-time during the beginning of my grad school career, and then sort of did grad school full-time, graduated middle of 2008. With all that was happening in 2008, I got lucky because of the network of friends that I've made throughout grad school, landed a fairly fun, good paying job in Chicago at a large firm that was similar to Brian's firm at the time, was doing many, almost exclusively project in the Middle East. That was a lot of fun for about a year. And then, just like Brian was saying, all the projects just disappeared. But coincidentally, I had to come back to Milwaukee to take care of my dad at the time, and then joined up with a couple of friends. After a bunch of meetings, we decided that we wanted to have our own venture, and that's how Design Studios was formed, with myself and 8 other people at the time. So, and never looked back since 2010. So that's a quick history of my career.
Okay, thanks, Juan. And Alex, you ready?
So I graduated undergraduate in 2009, and so kind of right in the middle of basically right before everything kind of started to come back. And I guess I have 2 stories. One is mine, one is my wife. We both were at school at the same time, but I was able actually to get a position as a research assistant for a small practice for the summer, and then was lucky enough to get hired on after the summer as a full-time employee. I got that position though through a connection with someone else. So I actually was talking to one of my professors and said, I'm looking for a job, can't find anything, can't afford to go back to grad school right now. And then she actually recommended me to another set of graduate professors that I had never had any contact with, and basically just showed up and worked really hard over the summer, and then got offered the full-time job starting in August. And so it was kind of lucky that way. I mean, I think the big thing was that I took what I might describe as a pay cut to be a full-time employee. It was not a high-paying job, but at that time, it was a job. It was a job at a good firm, at a place that I wanted to work. So that was kind of the calculus that I did at that point. My wife had kind of a slightly different experience. Was trying to find jobs before graduating, couldn't find any jobs, and actually decided very last minute to apply to grad school where we had gone to undergrad. and was waitlisted and then ended up getting in. But it was kind of a late in the process decision, just because we were trying to get jobs right out of undergraduate and just couldn't find it. So in some ways, maybe to reiterate Allie's point, I felt like I kind of got lucky, but it was also leveraging my connections. Like I knew people that were like cold calling offices, and it just, at that point, it wasn't working, because it's you and everybody else. So I think it was really helpful to have somebody that had seen me work very hard to recommend me to someone else, and then to have that opportunity to demonstrate to them that I could work very hard, even if it was over just the summer and it was like a stipend project. And I guess my only advice would be, take the time to do whatever you can do to progress your career. And I just reflect back onto my colleagues at that time and the things that we were doing that summer. So lots of people, I don't like recommending doing competitions because they don't pay and they can be exploitative. But at the same time, those people that were doing that ended up starting their own practice. And then, other people ended up not staying in architecture. They ended up going into, I actually have a colleague who ends up being using his design skills and using his ability to work in Rhino in 3D. He got, now he's the vice president of like one of the largest the vice president of design of the largest event planning company in Chicago, because nobody else in that industry had that skill set. And he was able to bring it to that industry and essentially change the way that they designed events for that company. So I think it's, in some ways you have to be really flexible. And in other ways you have to think about how you continue to progress your career, whether that's through competitions where you can continue to sort of generate work for your portfolio, whether that's through going to events and networking, whether that's through taking an online class to get better at Revit or Grasshopper or Enscape, or whatever the software is that you think is sort of lower, but just continue to push your skill set to build on that, so that when that job opportunity does come, they could say, what have you been doing the last 3 months? And you can say, well, I've learned this software and I've gone to these events. And I think it just shows initiative, and it helps to, it's just going to help you. And you never know, you might make a connection in that process that then eventually lands you the job.
So now I'm going to facilitate some questions, and I'm going to ask each of you a question, a different question, but please feel free to chime in if the topic is something that you want to add to. But John, I wanted to go back to you for a second and talk about, Alex, just a few of you had hinted at this notion of skills, building up your skills, and maybe we could be a little bit more specific about what firms are looking for in terms of skill sets that students might want to work on during this time. John, can you field that first?
Sure, and I'll keep it brief. I think there are some universal skills that are true. Well, the definition of universal. So communication being one. The communication skills, and whether that's verbal or written, design representation skills, those are generally speaking ubiquitous and universal regardless of the firm that you might be approaching. 95% of firms, I think, are probably utilizing Revit as their primary production tool. So, I can say it more generically, so certainly, BIM software, but Revit will get you in the door at most firms, and I don't know, others can hop in on this as well.
I think to piggyback off of John, one thing that we learned during 2008 that a lot of firms learned, especially with BIM coming online as heavy as it is right now, is how to be lean and how to do things efficiently. And one thing we can learn from this is I know a lot of people in school are learning parametrics and scripting and things like that, but not just knowing how to do that to make forms or influence designs, but how can you do things parametrically to get a drawing set done more quickly, add annotation faster, how do you get schedules and things like that put together? So things that maybe you don't necessarily work on in school, but coming out and really understanding the power of Revit and how quickly it can get things done, you know, using Dynamo to do things like that as well.
Well, thanks, Brian. I'm going to steer this one to maybe Allie and Tuan. Both of you talked about this idea of passion, kind of finding your passion, the things that you were interested in, and how that helped kind of steer you in a particular direction. So I wonder if you can help maybe just talk a little bit more about that, like how one that has sustained you over the years and obviously directed you to certain kinds of positions, but maybe sharing some insights with students as to how to sort of hone that for, especially for, I think, our younger undergraduate students that are maybe just, you know, beginning their careers. Allie, do you want to start? Sorry. I'm looking right at you. Can't you see me staring at you saying, go ahead? Allie,
for me personally, my passions lie in placemaking and community-based design and design as advocacy. So I've kind of just really kind of looked to apply to places that are aligned with those goals. I've also built up my networks based off of different organizations. I was a board member of the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. I'm one of the co-founders of Women in Design. So just different, when I was in Seattle, I was a tour guide for the Seattle Architectural Foundation. So just always kind of getting involved with different organizations. AIA is a great organization to, thanks for the thumbs up, John, for networking and getting to know more about the profession and ways that architects really can be of service to the community, whether it's disaster relief or sustainability or advocacy, all kinds of great things, because, you know, as Allison said, we're creative solution finders. So how do we use that design thinking to kind of help build up different aspects of your community? It's kind of what I would say for finding your passions.
Thanks, Tuan.
Yeah, passion. I think I went into architecture as a kind of a compromise between hard sort of science and mathematics and art. So there was always a seed of searching for that creative act. And I think that, I got lucky with landing that job in Chicago working at that firm because they were mostly design oriented. We did some sort of CD and CA stuff, but it was a lot of design. And so it sort of gave me a window into understanding that, in our architectural education, we're kind of taught to be somewhat generalist approach to things. But when I got to that firm, I saw that there was a lot of niches within just the design aspect of architecture that could be very skill specific. So while I was there all on my own, again, this is sort of just the desire to be able to create things. This was late 2008. I was teaching myself how to script on my own time so that I was able to produce the kind of forms and objects that the firm was looking for to be able to respond to their client needs. So and that was kind of a eye opener to be able to understand that there's an aspect of architecture that could be very skill specific and not so general. And then when I came back to Milwaukee, that passion sort of was fueled with regrouping with the 8-9 people that I mentioned. We all were kind of like-minded in that aspect, that we were searching for a way to practice creative space making and just sort of being able to have an expression for form making. That group of people was sort of fundamental in fueling that passion. And beyond that, I think we talked about a lot, I think a few people mentioned network. I have a different word for that, and it's kind of a play on word, but it's a kind of a trust fund, right? But it's like a trust group. We were able to kind of build Design Fugitives on a group of friends that had mutual passion, but also mutual trust. So that when we went into business together, we knew that we had each other's back, at least at the beginning. And that, I tell this to many people, I feel very lucky where I ended up. Lots of things happened to create Design Fugitives, and lots of people was involved, but passion was always there, and that passion just really boils down to having the outlet to be creative. And I picked up the skills along the way as needed to keep that passion burning. So.
Okay, great. Thanks. So Allison, this is for you. Are students wasting their time looking for a job at a firm that isn't hiring?
I think if they hear they're not hiring, they're probably not hiring. However, I think that doesn't mean that you couldn't ask for, I had one student that's graduating that I had as a student who asked for a portfolio review. That's still a connection. Yeah, if I hear somebody that is hiring, that might, after I look at his portfolio again and familiarize myself. So I think there's other things you can do with firms that aren't hiring that, might be different as connections. I think those interpersonal relationships, those building the network is really still important, and it's a little bit harder to do now virtually, but it can still be out there. And just because firms aren't hiring now doesn't mean they won't be in 3 or 6 months. Those connections, I think, are still important. I think there's a lot of firms that are trying to still find good people. I think that there are probably firms that are trying to take advantage of improving their workforce now. I think that you have a lot of skills that we have seen are very necessary right now. All of you have been doing a virtual studio or a virtual thesis for the last 3 months, and you've been working with other people using a variety of platforms that we're all incorporating into our workplace. So you do have skill sets that we all have that are necessary now too, in addition to coding or graphic representation or whatever you're finding your passion to be. I think you have had a unique opportunity to come out into this marketplace more prepared than any of us were to go into it. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, John.
Well, so chiming in, I agree with absolutely everything Allison said. And directly, though, to the point of your question, so are students wasting their time? looking for a job at a firm that might not be hiring, I would say no. I mean, you're not wasting your time unless you don't know why you're looking at that firm. So, and why that firm should be interested in you. So that is, it's a waste of your time to just shotgun out a lot of resumes. That's a waste. But if you double down and do your research and look deeper and be more strategic and thoughtful about your process, why are you interested in a particular firm and why should they be interested in you? You can make your case. It's harder to do in a down economy. Most businesses are more cautious about overextending themselves. They don't want to get too far out over their skis as far as hiring folks. But to Allison's point, good firms will always be looking for good people regardless of the economy. We have, so our firm, we've hired 4 people have started. So we started working from home on March 17th. We've had 4 people start since then, 2 in Chicago, 2 in Milwaukee, and we've got 3 summer interns who are going to be starting over the next 4 weeks. And that's, one of my primary responsibilities is to continue to look for good, talented people. So it's not a waste as long as you know what it is you're looking for.
Oh, that's
I
great.
also think there's something to be said. I think, the typical thing is to, look at the job boards and go to different offices' web pages to see if they have positions open. And oftentimes, if a firm is too busy and needs help, they're not updating their website and they're not posting things on job boards, especially if they're a smaller firm that just doesn't have that level of capacity. And so I would encourage you to reach out, because sometimes they're just like, they do need somebody, but they just don't have the ability, because they are busy, to put that publication out there. So if there is a firm that interests you, I would encourage you to just reach out to them, even though they're not saying it so on a job board or on their website.
And I would think about non-traditional places too. There's a lot of facilities people grappling with how to set up workplaces to bring people back. How to as I mentioned earlier, how to work with their hotel plans to reopen or temporarily be used as something else. And I think, again, what Allie did when she came out, I think is a great thing. I think firms that, like my own, that probably aren't looking for somebody right now, no matter how good they are, unfortunately, in 3 or 6 months, when you can answer what you did with this, this couple of months that you were off. I mean, AmeriCorps, Habitat for Humanity, other roles if you have the luxury to do so, but other things as well. Anything that, if it was a competition, if it was something else, I would just continue to apply, continue to research where you're applying. I think Allie had a really good point on that. How, that the shotgun approach just doesn't work. But that research of why you're there, and John said that as well, what firm is right for you, and keep holding them in your heart, because someday, if it is a match, it'll be there.
I think now that people might have some time too, some free time to do that extra research. Alex, I'm going to come back to you for a second. For students who are going to be in school for the next couple of years, how would you recommend getting work experience if firms are not hiring as much for summer internships? And you hinted at this a little bit, how you yourself got started, but I just wonder if you might give some more specific advice about students that are coming back next year for school, and how to maintain some sort of work experience, what that might look like.
Yeah, I think maybe it's two-part. One, I think part of it would be to sort of reiterate a point that we've been making, is just like to stay busy. Like creative people will find creative ways to continue to produce. I think that's really important, even if it's not something right away that you're getting paid for. So if it's, whatever, I think we're saying competition, these types of things. And I mean that specifically like on your own stuff. If it's, and then just to reflect on my thing, it was like just getting my foot in the door and finding a small thing, like finding a small project to work on for a month, was really helpful in sort of demonstrating my capacity to do the work. I don't know. I think the benefit of being a student, of knowing that you're going to come back to school in 3 months, is that you can experiment. You can take a job at a construction company, because it's a 3-month job. You're not agreeing to work for them for 6 years. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one of the things that's always so great about internships over the summer, is that it's an opportunity, not in this necessarily in this condition, but it's an opportunity to try working at a big firm, try working at a small firm, try going and work for a construction company, work for a company that does digital fabrication. Like, it's in some ways the benefit that you have as students who know you're going to be coming back to school is that you don't have to agree to an open-ended thing. And that's actually, in some ways, that's actually helpful for, I would imagine, that's somewhat helpful for practices that are looking to hire, that they know that, like, okay, it's a limited thing, it's a certain amount of hours, at a certain point you're gone. Now the caveat to that is that practices and firms still have to plan for the projects and the payroll that they have available. But I do think that there's an opportunity and an advantage there to being a student being a student in the summer that knows that, like, if I don't like the job, it's done in 2 months. But then I would say, to reiterate something that Allison said earlier, which is every job has something to teach you about the practice of architecture, even if it's a construction job, even if it's, working at a fabricator, a metal fabricator. Like, there's still stuff to learn there that you can bring back to school when you're done.
All right, Brian, the question for
Can I
you.
add on that for real quick?
Oh,
Sorry.
sure, absolutely.
I'd also encourage, if you have the means, to volunteer. If you are able to, if you've got some scholarships or grants and you have the ability to not need a paycheck, then maybe call up some community design centers or community development centers, or there's a lot of really great design opportunities out there, or nonprofits that can't afford designers that could really benefit from them. So if there's a nonprofit that you're passionate about, see if they have any design needs or just needs in general, because that's still building your connections, and that's still building your experience. And as Alex said, you get to say, well, what did you do this summer? Well, I volunteered and provided some, X, Y, and Z service. So it's not a loss if you have the ability to take the time to volunteer as well.
Thanks. So Brian, do you envision the field of architecture moving to a more digital format after the pandemic? And if so, what specific opportunities or challenges will firms be facing?
Well, I think so. I think it'll be hard for some of us to go back 100% to what we were doing. I think in my firm, we were already trying to go as digital as possible with PDFs and everything like that, trying to re-emphasize that green mentality that we had. But even for myself, with 2 kids that are in school and not knowing if school's going to be back in place in the fall, I don't envision myself going back into my office until at least September. And so this is going to be how we act for a while. And we're doing well. We're doing these Zoom meetings. We're able to collaborate on teams. And I think, going back to what we were saying earlier, if that's what you guys are doing in school right now, you're doing what we're doing. You're interacting the same way that we're interacting, and just continue to push that, continue to understand how I can show my design, show my thought process digitally now is going to continue. I think there's a mentality that everybody wants to kind of get back to face-to-face, but maybe we'll find that this is a very economical way to move forward. Less travel, which is also very difficult on the earth. So if we want to emphasize that idea as architects, that this is potentially the way we are going to continue working for quite a while.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on what Brian said. Is there's a lot of discovery happening right now, across all businesses that may have hesitated, believing that they could be functional, working remote from each other, and they're discovering that, yeah, hey, this isn't so difficult. We had an expectation that our productivity was going to drop, and over the first 4 weeks or so, our productivity, just absolute, measurement of what people are recording on their timesheet, it stayed the same. So a lot of that I can attribute to the level of trust. Tuan used, that great trust fund metaphor. And so, we're a very collaborative workplace, and it would have, almost, you would have presumed it to be antithetical that we could work separate from each other. But because we had trust in those relationships, it actually has worked out pretty well. And I agree with Brian. This is not commuting. It's a good thing on so many different levels. So I think this is creating a flexibility that's going to last a lot longer than the coronavirus.
Thanks, John. Tuan, I wanted to bring it back to you, maybe I'm picking up on John's comment about the trust issue, and maybe convert it in terms of risk and anxiety around starting your own practice at the time you did. And obviously we've had the benefit of having you as part of our graduate colloquium series, so I've heard your full story. And I think that the students in particular, some have said in some exit interviews with our graduating students, our graduating graduate students, some have indicated that, hey, maybe I would start a firm. And so maybe thinking, could you share some advice around the anxiety around making that decision? And then, what are some suggestions on how to just, go for it?
Yeah, so I think, interestingly enough, a few of us mentioned the word luck. I think if I was honest, yes, there was a risk that I took when I came back to Milwaukee and only signed up for a part-time job at a very small firm in which it was just me, the owner, and another Syrup alum, actually. But I purposely was only working part-time there so that I can continue to grow Design Fugitive. But the reality was that for me to been able to hedge that risk, it was one, my parents letting me crash at their place for I don't know how many years. Two, my girlfriend, then fiance, then wife was very encouraging in terms of me taking on this this business venture. And then three, it was that kind of group of people that I trusted, and that they also trusted in me. But in terms of anxiety, there was a lot of anxiety. But I think what carried us through was that we had a vision and we had passion. It didn't matter how big or small the project that came through. As long as we were able to communicate our vision to the client and they sort of understood what we were trying to do, that was such a reward to be able to execute. And then, slowly the word got out. We had more people interested in our work. I would say that So we officially started in 2010. It took about 2 years of really bootstrapping up until we moved into this space that I'm in now, for us to have a real understanding that we were running a real business. So it took about 2 years. There was about 3 very large projects that came in that year that gave us kind of a great boost of confidence that we were going to be able to run a business and sustain it. And it's been pretty consistent since, very slowly, organically growing. I'm always kind of very proud at the fact that we haven't spent $1 on marketing. And back to what a lot of us have been saying, is that it's that network of people that sort of builds our referral network that's been really great for us. But I think that if you have a good support system, I say go for it.
All right. I like that. So we've got about 4 minutes left. I'm going to ask each of you to maybe just add, if there's any piece of quick advice that you might give that we haven't talked about already. I'm going to start in reverse order, start with you, Alex, and then work our way back to John. And then we'll close things out. So Alex.
I mean, that we haven't covered. I mean, I think the biggest thing, honestly, is, and this is probably the hardest thing to but just stay positive about it. Like, that will help. Like, finding the thing you're passionate about will help to keep you sort of engaged and positive and sort of looking for the next thing. It's a tough thing to sort of just say, oh, just be positive. But like, at the same time, I do think it's the opportunities will come, and especially if you continue sort of pursuing your career and advancing. So I think you just have to, find the thing to keep you engaged and excited at every step, even if it's like going onto lynda.com and doing like tutorials to like learn a new software, whether it's learning Revit. Like, just approach all of those things with a real intensity and a real joy. And I think it'll only serve you well.
All right, Tuan.
I will say that part of the reason why I'm here is that because I refuse to join the Revit team in the firm in Chicago.
All right, you're gonna leave that? Drop the mic and walk out on that.
I think I'll sum it up with sort of my own experiences that in architecture school, I think it was because it was, I didn't really have an idea that I wanted to start a business. But if you do have any kind of inclination, do yourself a favor and just take some very basic business classes. You have a great head start than where we started.
Excellent. Allie.
Honestly, the first thing that came to me was kind of along the same lines as Alex, to just be true to yourself. Like, you're not going to do yourself any service, just not being honest with yourself and what you're looking for in your career. There's a lot of ways that you can take architecture and the education that you have. So, just follow your passions, and also just know that this too shall pass. Like, we've seen it all. Granted, this is like, once a century, I guess, this experience. But, you heard Allison talk about the 90s, 2000s, 2008. Like, it seems there's a cycle here. There's a pattern, and architects are still here. So, and we're not going anywhere. So just, know that this too will pass, and you'll someday be on a panel like this. Talking about your experience in 2020.
All right, Brian.
I think I just want to kind of circle back and say, think outside the box. Follow your passions. Don't necessarily think that the only way to become an architect is traditionally go into a design studio. There's so many other places that satellite around our profession that are looking for people that have training as an architect, as a designer, that speak the language of designers, and we need that. We need those places are changing, are looking for people like us. So expand your idea of what architecture is.
Excellent. Allison.
I'm gonna kind of take it back to to what to expect in job seeking a little bit. I would just remind people that especially the middle size, which we fall into, and the small firms are in crazy situations right now. And typically the person in those firms, which would be myself, who's in charge of hiring, is just, I'm coming back in touch with my business self. You know, I'm spending more time with my banker than I ever have. And I don't have an HR guy. I wish I did, John. You know, I have no idea how to onboard somebody virtually. I haven't even gotten to think about that, you know. So, I mean, there's just so much that we're struggling with in terms of direction and keeping everybody positive and everything else at this particular juncture. So just be mindful of who you're approaching and what all they have on their plate. Not that you can know everything in that sort of situation, but really this is going to be like 3 to 6 months of a kind of really huge wave. And so kind of listen to what everybody else said about how, you know, there's experiences that you can have that are not architecture potentially, or they are architecture, that, you know, might not be your forever home, but might be a really good experience to have in the volunteer world, outside the profession, in the profession, in firms that are willing to have you, that you'll learn something there. You know, you'll learn a lot there. So it's going to be great.
Thanks, Allison. All right, John, you want to?
I'll give it my best. I mean, really, everybody's has already touched on some phenomenal ideas. I loved how Alex started that off with being optimistic and being positive. I would just offer, but do that in a very intentional way. So how do you channel that positivity or optimism? Well, channel it to be very intentional about your personal growth. So, and then that kind of leads to a couple of things that Allie said earlier in this whole conversation. She was talking about weird, dumb luck. And I would say invest in weird, dumb luck. So I know Allie's work ethic, and it's incredible. So the weird, dumb luck that has found her is because she's been working her tail off. And so if you then just sort of like wrap your head around just the notion of being resilient and just investing in yourself, and then picking up on what Allison said is, you know, you be patient with, because you're trying to establish these relationships with others. You have to be patient with the others. So you can only control what you can control. And so that's it. Now I'm just rambling. So
I'm going to follow up with one piece on John's. My business partner has a saying, because I always say I have, you know, weird, dumb luck too. And he reminds me that I've put myself in a position to be lucky. So that would be kind of what I would say is, you know, Allie has put herself in a position to be lucky. Brian has put himself, Alex has put himself, John has put himself in a position to be lucky. So think about where that is for you to get to your next step.
Oh, I think that's great. That's a great ending. I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted to do an alumni panel and Alex as our in-house faculty is really getting students to understand that this could be them, right? This, I think, Allie, you brought up, this is you 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, and that you can really see yourself, you know, even though you're struggling right now, this is a challenging time, that this is this is some great advice from some experts that have gone through it before and can provide some pathways for us to kind of get out of this. So I just want to thank our panelists today for your great advice, and really appreciate it. Trudy's applauding everybody. I'm going to applaud for everybody. And we want to thank you, and everyone have a great night. So thanks again. We can unmute and chat for a minute.
No, this is going to be available to other students who maybe couldn't make it, right?
Yes, this is recorded, and we will share it with internally with our students. Absolutely.
I'll make a plug for the Rose Enterprise Fellowship. That's another opportunity for getting architecture experience that is a little non-traditional, but still affiliated with architecture. The Rose Fellowship is all over the country, and they're pretty substantially endowed, so I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but they provide architectural services to different nonprofits around the country.
Cool. And I would put in a plug for ArchiPrep. So that's a tool that AIA came out with to help emerging professionals study for their AREs. So that's another wonderful thing that people could be doing. I realize that the test centers have been shut down.
Ooh,
and
LEAD is now allowing you to take your tests online as of today. So get yourself certified there.
Yeah.
Take the time to do it.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. So it's the investing in yourself, but if you can knock out some of that ARE studying, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ArchiPrep is free to AIA members through August.
Yeah, there was a group of grad students that I would meet at the Shorewood Library, which I know you can't do right now, but you can do it virtually, and I couldn't have then, to study for the ARE, because we could then take it right out of school, and now I think you can again. So, yep. That's a great idea, John. I mean, just to knock off some of those sections that you forget, 5 years out of school. I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
The statistics around test taking will be very interesting after this whole thing passes.
Yeah, really interesting. So,
well, go ahead, John.
No, I didn't have it. I mean, Brian was right. I'm sorry that NCARB, couldn't figure out a way to, to get that to work. And they've had a couple of months now.
Don't get me started on NCARB.
I'm happy that if anybody wants to unfreeze your video and join us in the conversation, you're welcome to. But I also want to be respectful. If people need to go, absolutely take off.
Brian, do you have?
Go ahead.
Brian, do you have a link to that the LEAD exam? Because we have a group of green buildings concentrated students that I could share that with.
Sure.
Because I just went on the website. I couldn't find.
I saw it on LinkedIn, so let me see if I can find it.
Maybe updating everyone's LinkedIn profile, right? That's
another phenomenal idea, because it really is. So when we talk about, or somebody brings up the word networking, I think unfortunately people's minds go to the well, I got to go to an event and I have to, talk to people. Well, there are so many different manifestations of networking. So whether it's through the digital realm, LinkedIn or others, but I mean, really just that research that you can do about other businesses, reaching out to firms and exploring ideas. I mean, that's all networking. I mean, you're creating impressions in people's minds, and those impressions and the reputation you create through all of these little interactions, again, that's going to last so much longer than the current coronavirus crisis. So,
and I would also encourage people, I mean, if somebody's doing something professionally that you're interested in, at least in this culture, if you can't reach out to them, or you can't go ask them to get a cup of coffee. Reach out to them, you know, ask them questions, or and they'll get back to you. As Allison said, be mindful of what's going on in their world. I mean, I'm a single mom working from home full time, so that's a lot. I never thought I'd be a teacher. But, you know, I think that it's a great opportunity to find a, I think, like, I like the term champion, you know, like in addition to mentor, you know, find somebody, because I think everyone that you're looking at right now has had champions on their side, to kind of be their advocate and help guide their thoughts, and, you know, career questions. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out, and if they have the time, most people are kind and more than happy to talk with you.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara, did you find the link?
Yeah, I just posted it in the chat section.
She posted it.
I have a question. So I don't remember if it was Brian or John that was saying, you know, don't waste your time with sending people your, you know, sending all of these companies your resumes. Do you go and, you know, email them and be like, hey, I'm interested in your company, you know, and then when they show interest in you, is that when you send out your resume, or how does that work? I've tried to, I'm really interested in landscape design. So I've been trying to reach out to some of them so that I can try to work, you know, landscape design during the summers. And, you know, I don't really get very many emails back. So I'm trying to just figure out how to, you know, should I call them directly? I mean, how do I go navigating how to do something like that?
I know, Brian, if you want to jump on.
I think one thing that was said pretty early in our conversation is don't just scattershot your same cover letter. You really have to know who your audience is, what they value as a firm, what they value in their employees, where they're trying to go. And you really need to be cognizant of how you write your letter, your email, and even rework your resume. I believe that your resume should never be the same for every firm that you send it to. You really need to emphasize what they emphasize so that you know that you fit into that culture, or that you will kind of come in and be able to hit the ground running. As far as how to get your foot in the door, I think a lot of that is just, you know, knowing the network, how to get in touch with them. Pick up a phone. Honestly, a lot of people react a lot quicker, a lot better to a phone call. If they see an email from someone that they don't know, they might not get to it. I have 100 emails today from people I do know that I didn't get to. So it's, you know, figuring out how to get the foot in the door is the toughest part. But understand that, yeah, that letter has to be worded in a way that people are going to take interest in it, because it's the language that they use at the office. And
so that is phenomenal advice, Jonathan. But it's not only, I want to understand how you are interested. How do you evidence? So let's say I was a part of a landscape architecture firm. How do you evidence, and we don't know each other, how do you evidence that you are interested in our business? And it's more than customizing the cover letter to me. It's more than you happen to go to our website and looked at what we were doing. But it's, have we written white papers? Read the white papers, look for other, you know, kind of similar information and say, hey, I thought you might find this interesting, whether it's something you worked on or something that you found out there, where you basically evidence to me that there's a reason for me to want to strike up, to accept your invitation to start a conversation. That's what we only had so much time, but when you start to talk about doing your research, I mean, that's, so target the firms that you're most interested in, and learn everything you can about them so that you can make that case as to, it would be insane for me not to want to take your call. Even to, Allison's point, I might not have a position that I can hire you for now, but maybe down the road. And in the meantime, if we're able to have a conversation, I mean, you might ask, well, what are some things that, that could be interesting for me to research? And just come up with some ideas, and then work with somebody at SARA to do an independent research project around, and then that gets back to what Alex was talking about. It's to, be productive, during a period of time where maybe you can't land the job, but you can be working on some directed independent research that this company would be interested in. So.
Jonathan, I might add from the school's perspective, I mean, we're certainly here to help you make connections as well. Obviously, we have the externship program, but if there's a firm, one of the things I would do is talk to your faculty that you've had in studios in particular, but also looking at the externship program list, and there are some landscape firms on there, or obviously you can always reach out to me. But if somebody talks about championing, like if somebody can help you make the connection, so be the person who sends an email introduction, here's Jonathan, he's interested in landscape. Do you have time to just sit, have a coffee with him? That kind of quick, I mean, I write those notes all the time for students that are asking for a quick introduction. And that means that the student is leveraging my relationship with somebody. Now, obviously want to make sure that I'm advocating for somebody that's, sincerely interested in something. But that's that you're building on the network that your faculty have as well. And so you really want to tap into that. And that's what we're here for. I expect an email from you tomorrow.
I'm already halfway done typing it.
Excellent.
And Jonathan, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Like you just gotta keep trying, keep going.
I mean, I don't know, Jonathan, if you saw in the chat, like a couple of people recommended Rasheen. She's a landscape architect. Mm-hmm. For instance, I know her from the Women in Design Network. Allie knows her. So I don't work with landscape architects, but I know landscape architects. And so you can, have a coffee with Rasheen and just see what the profession is like in Milwaukee. Do you need to expand your search to, regionally, Madison, Chicago?
Right.
Landscape in particular is not a huge component of the local community, but that doesn't mean that there aren't. I mean, Allison has landscape architects in her firm.
And Jen, who is an adjunct at UWM, so
yeah,
and she's kind of in Allie's role right now, so that's one thing that we could actually use a little help in. But
but I actually I think everyone will remember you because you asked a question.
Yeah, they're showing up.
There you go, Jonathan. You've already made an impression. And
you mentioned.
But this is interesting, right? Because now you can feel like, hey, I was a student who asked a question during the panel discussion. Allie, you have time for a coffee sometime? Like that.
Right.
That's the thing. That's putting yourself out there. That's building your network right there and then. And so you've made the first step.
Right.
Setting yourself up to be lucky. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had Jennifer's class this last semester.
There's your connection.
Yeah.
Don't email me, email Jennifer. She's your connection.
Yeah. I was actually planning on emailing her and asking her if she wanted to do an independent study about landscape architecture. So we'll see how that works out.
Right. And then invite somebody to critique your work that's at a firm that you're interested in working for.
Yeah.
It all, who she may know, it all just comes together.
Mo, do we have any news about summer class offerings from the School of Architecture?
We have 4 summer class offerings right now. We have an online studio that's being taught by Monica Thadhani, which is about a little bit in response to the pandemic. We have a BIM class that's online. We have a portfolio design class, and we have an architecture theory class taught by our new fellow that's coming in the fall.
Great.
So a whole suite. This is the first time we've offered summer classes in years. So, you know, there's opportunities out there for students to get some skills, get some classes. So hopefully they'll take advantage of that as well.
I think it'd be interesting, or an interesting research project would be to see how other nations are handling, you know, design changes. Like I just read an article about how New Zealand is basically getting rid of their parallel parking and making their sidewalks wider because people aren't driving, they're walking more. How will design changes in cities, what will they look like, and how they're being handled around the world?
Quite fascinating what's happening.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how different cultures are handling this.
Well, I want to say thank you again to everybody, the panelists in particular, students for participating, Jonathan for asking a question and bringing the conversation. But thanks so much, and I just really appreciate your time and expertise in this area. So I am going to clap officially.
All right.
Hang in there, everybody.
Well, thank you. Yes.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, Mo. This was great.
Virtual meeting soon.
Oh,
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
good night.
My best.
Thank you, Mel.
Bye.
Bye.